Good evening. Welcome to the ShadowTrader Video Weekly for Sunday, March 11th, 2012. All right, how's everyone doing out there? I was contemplating doing the entire video in that voice, but that would just be kind of kooky, I guess. I don't know. Anyway, S&P Weekly in front of you. What I would like to talk about first of all is the hanging man pattern that I just noticed formed on the weeklies of all the majors. So this is SPX. And this is Dow, and this is the NASDAQ Composite. You see how it's hammer, 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 but it's really hanging man. And I'll explain that in a moment. OEX, big time. All right, that's S&P 100. And the Russell. Now the Russell is interesting. So the Russell actually doesn't have the pattern, but the Russell has a lot of relative weakness to the others because you can see the difference between where we are in relation to the trend line and, for instance, where that would be in the SPX. Correct? If you connect the same highs, you're obviously well through in the SPX. So in that sense, I think the Russell doesn't really count. So let's just focus on what we're seeing here. So you have S&P, Dow, NASDAQ, S&P 100, all of which have formed a hanging man on their weeklies. Hanging man is when you have a hammer like this, but it's at the uptrend of a move, at the end of a move here, end of an uptrend, or sort of punctuating it as opposed to kicking it off down here. That's called a bottoming tail when you have a hammer like that. Hanging man is not bullish like a bottoming tail is. Hanging man is considered bearish. Let's take a close look at the psychological implications of this and think about why this could be bearish and what would happen to sellers and buyers if sellers were to gain an upper hand here, so to speak, right? What would happen to, I should say, what should happen to price, right? If price is at 1370 in the S&P, all right, and over the course of the past week, and we're at the top of an uptrend, right? We know we're a little bit shaky here because the market's hasn't had a meaningful correction in a while. So if we're at the top of an uptrend and we've been going up for a while, and price opens at 1370 and then falls down below 1350, as you can see in the hammer, and then recovers, at that point, if everything just stopped now and didn't continue, it's all bullish, I think. But the way that the hanging man, I think, becomes bearish is what happens if just a little bit of selling comes in. I think that the reason psychologically that if a little bit of selling comes in and starts to bring the market lower, the reason why this becomes bearish is the simple fact that in the prior week when the hammer was formed, price moved lower and then returned back to where it started. But when it moved back to where it started, it did not advance further from that point. So it's like basically like, I like to think of it as that the buyers, the bulls, they were saved by the bell, so to speak, once. But after that, they're a little more nervous. And then now when sellers come in and price starts to get lower, then they think, okay, you know what? I might not be as lucky this time. Let me bail. And that's what I think is the psychological implication behind the hanging man. If you kind of deconstruct the candlestick pattern and think about what's going on on both sides, what the buyers are thinking, what the sellers are thinking, that's what I'm thinking. You know, you can do the same thing for almost any candlestick pattern, right? We can look at, you know, the bottoming tail. You have sellers, sellers moving price lower, and then finally the sellers throw they all hit it really hard, and the buyers all throw in the towel at the wrong time. And then obviously price has to advance from there, you know. So you can kind of go back and like put the psychological implication on almost any of these patterns. But this one is very interesting, being that it is a hanging man, and we do have it on all of them. So if price this week doesn't advance quickly, I wouldn't be surprised to see sort of buyer fatigue. And if they do start to sell it off, that could have pretty bearish implications, because when the bottom of the tail in hanging man or any real hammer pattern, inverted or other, is violated, that's relatively bearish, right? Because we know that sellers took price during the course of the week below the 1350 area in the S&P. Then they got quote-unquote saved by the bell, as I was saying. They took price back up. But now, what do you think is going to happen to the psychological, you know, overall mindset of the players involved if the price moves back below that 1350? So it would be like a double test of that area, and I think it would bring in some more selling, which would bring us to the dominant trend line in the S&P, which is right about here, close to the 1320 area. All right. Profile-wise, let's look at profile here. This is interesting because Friday's action here was relatively bullish. A lot of value was built in this area. A lot of value was built in this area. This is the June contract now that we've switched over to. This is what's known as a poor high or an unsecured high. It means that there's no symmetry to the profile, meaning that you should have a symmetrical bell curve and there should be price up here. So very often price can sometimes gap up on the next day and put in some TPO prints, these are called TPOs, up in that area to repair the structure, quote unquote. And I talk about the repair a lot in the blog, in the pre-market blog. We'll get to that in a second. That's the scenario that could unfold on the upside is maybe you have a little bit of repair to the upside and then move back or continue. Obviously, I have no way of knowing that. But I did want to point out, more importantly, in the profile is that we've got 2 points of control on March 5th and also March 8th, and they're very, very close to each other. And that's the 1356.75 here, roughly 1357. Let's just call it 1357 area in the ES on the June contract, right? So let's keep that in mind. So I think if sellers come in on Monday morning, what you should be thinking as an ES trader, and in the sort of bigger picture, if you're swing trading, whatever, is you should be thinking that there could be a destination trade in play, meaning that sellers could be in control at least to here, to this POC, to 62.25. But if this POC is lost, I would say that this area should probably act as a magnet because you have 2 points of control there where you know that there was strong volume on 2 separate days, not that far in the past in that section. So that's what I'm going to be watching for this coming week. If we have any weakness off the open, I would think it's sellable to sort of fulfill the hanging man pattern, which is bearish. I would be thinking go with to the downside in the direction of, that means I would be thinking target 62, and then failure there I would be thinking target 57 in the market, and then just take it as it comes, from there. But this is sort of my thought process. And those of you that read my pre-market blog on the website, I'll be getting to that in a second, you'll be checking that out probably on Monday morning. I'll be talking a lot about that. Blog is up and running. I'm really excited about it. Again, I've been posting pre-market stuff into it. This is a educational article that I just finished on the broken wing butterfly March 11th over this weekend, and you'll recognize this if you read Ask the Shadow. It's actually a reprint of the question that came into Ask the Shadow. It is a detailed breakdown of a broken wing butterfly spread that I did in the last week on Apple on the put side. And like I said, if you check out the blog, there's a lot of really good information here talking about how that play works, how that play should be set up, what it's supposed to do, etc., etc. So check that out. It's Ask the Shadow, which is right near the video section here in the weekend update. Just click on the table of contents. It'll take you there. Or you can check it out in the blog here. Also remember, those of you that haven't registered yet, the forum is up and running. We're excited about that. So come and interact with us in any of these categories here, and we'd love to see you there, all right? That's it. On behalf of myself and the entire ShadowTrader team here in beautiful Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, I wish you good trading and good night.